Welcome to the Personal Tanya, day 53 for the 15th of Shvat, for Tu B'Shvat. In the doctrine of divine unity, we've learned that God is one and God is the only being that exists. God is the source of life. To sin is therefore to divorce from God in our own perception, and hence to sin is to divorce from life and to become one with the opposite of life, to become one with death. Now, why would a person ever want to do such a thing? The Alter Rebbe in today's Tanya explains that it's simply because of delusion. If a person recognized how sin is indeed separating him from God, he would never sin. And the hidden natural love would prevent him from cutting himself off from God in an idolatrous separation from God. It's only because he deludes himself to believe that he isn't being separated from God at all that he's able to proceed to sin. This is called the Ruach Shtus, the spirit of folly that our sages discussed in the Talmud. The Alter Rebbe gives us an example of adulterous folly. The Alter Rebbe talks about why a person would cheat on his spouse to ruin, or her spouse, to ruin their marriage. The Alter Rebbe says that if people understood that an act of adultery would destroy their marriage, their life, and their family, if they realized the consequences, they would be able to prevail over their temptations, and they would not succumb to their temptations. It's only because of a spirit of folly that tells them, it's not so bad, it's going to be okay, it's not so terrible, the marriage will survive, that they proceed to sin with adultery. In exactly the same way as it is with the adulterous delusion, the Alter Rebbe says it is with the idolatrous delusion as well. Because in truth, every sin is idolatry, every sin cuts us off from God. And if we only realize how it ruins our spiritual connection to God, we'd be able to overcome the temptation to sin. It's just that we have a sense of spiritual folly that confuses us and tells us that the relationship with God is not going to be compromised, that confuses us, deludes us to think, it's going to be okay. The Alter Rebbe gives us a little perspective on the spiritual damage that happens once we sin. The Talmud tells us that even a mosquito was created before man. A mosquito represents the lowest spiritual negative energy because a mosquito takes in and does not excrete. Now, I'm not familiar with the biology here, but I'm going to take it from the Alter Rebbe from Tanya that the mosquito will eat, but it doesn't excrete. So it takes, but it doesn't give. It represents the height of narcissism. And that's not because it's bad. It's just the way that God created it. It's just doing its job. But when we say that even a mosquito came before a human being, we mean that when a person sins, he's doing even worse than the mosquito, because the mosquito is just doing its job to be a narcissist. But when a person sins, he's actually violating his mission on this earth. When he does the wrong choice, when we sin, we are even worse than a mosquito. The Alter Rebbe concludes today's Tanya with a fascinating discovery about how animals perceive the natural supremacy of people over animals. We were created, Adam and Eve were created in such a way that they were supposed to dominate over the creatures of this earth. And animals are able to see the divine image upon us. But when we sin, then the animals can tell that we've divorced ourselves from the divine image. They're able to see that we are no longer supreme over them. We're no longer human. They see us as just a piece of meat, which can or cannot be used for the next meal. And this is how the Alter Rebbe explains what happened to Daniel in the lion's den. Because Daniel was truly righteous. That's why the lions in the den sensed the divine presence, the divine image of God upon him, and therefore they were humbled before him, and they lapped at his feet, they licked his feet, instead of devouring him alive. And the same thing I believe you can apply. If you want to be able to ascertain the spiritual character of someone, have your dog tell you. Invite the person over to your house and see how your dog reacts to this person. If the dog barks at them in a threatening and attacking way, couldn't be a very good sign. But if the dog is whimpering or submissive before the person whose character you're testing, it might just be a sign, based on Tanya chapter 24, that this person actually does bear the divine image upon them. This concludes today's Tanya. In the next Tanya for tomorrow, we'll talk about the degrees of disconnect which are affected through various sins, and how there's always hope to reconnect. But for today, that's a wrap. Let's try to apply. You can do this.